The year was 1867. There was lots of cowmen coming into Texas, lots of cattle, but there was still threats from Indians. On July the 11th, 1867, on the banks of the South Leon River in Hamilton County was a school at the Whirling Valley. Now this was a beautiful valley. It stretched out in front of the schoolhouse for a mile and a half, and just behind it was a long stretch of timber and underbrush. And the day that we're talking about, it was 2 o'clock on a Thursday afternoon, very hot. A daughter of Alexander Powers was standing in the door, and she saw horsemen coming fast toward the school. She told Miss Whitney, said, "I think it's Indians." And Miss Whitney said, "No, it's the cow hunters that's coming by." And all of a sudden, she got closer, and she could see it is Indians, and she went and took her little brother by the hand. They got out the window on the back and made it to safety in the trees. Now, by that time, Miss Whitney was alarmed. She went out and looked. Sure enough, the Indians were coming right toward the schoolhouse. She helped all of the children to get out of the window and run to the north. Some hid under the floor, some went to the trees behind her. But all of them was out and safe except the 2 little Cockendall boys, their little sister, and the little Manning girl who had been sick that day. Ann Whitney knew what her fate was going to be. The Indians was there, and they were looking at her through the cracks. One of them could speak some broken English, and he directed remarks to her. Now, all of this time, her only thought was for her children, the children in her care. And she wrung her hands and marched up and down, and please, let the children go. If you have to kill me, but let these children go. That's what she kept on saying all the time. The Indians, of course, were right there. They finally broke down the door. They were shooting arrows through the cracks. She was bleeding. The little Manning girl kept holding on to her skirts as she walked back and forth, back and forth. And of course, the little Manning girl was terrified. Ann Whitney was terrified. And by that time, she was breathing her last, but her last thought was of the children, and she helped the 2 little girls to get out the window and to head for the brush. Now, one of the Indians shot an arrow into the little back of the dog girl, but she kept right on going. They were safe, and there was nothing else that they could do to Ann Whitney. That only left the 2 Cockendall boys in the schoolroom. The Indian who could speak some broken English came in, and he said, "Do you want to go with us?" And one of the boys, they were terrified. One of the boys said yes, the other one said no. The one who said no was pushed down on a seat. John Cockendall was taken and placed on a horse. And by that time, of course, the Indians knew what their time limit was. They knew they had to get out, and they left. The Cockendall boy was kept on a horse 2 days and nights without being let down. When he got off, all of the hide peeled off of the inside of his legs. Now, he was recaptured 6 months or a year later, and he told his family that the second morning he had seen the men about sunrise. He had seen all of the men that were looking for them. And, of course, the Indians hit the brush and scattered, but he was saved. The only one that was captured out of all of the school children was the little Cockendall boy. And Ann Whitney managed to save every other child in her care that day.
I'm at the old Hamilton Cemetery outside of Hamilton, Texas, at the tombstone of Ann Whitney. Now, looking around today, it's a quiet, peaceful, almost serene setting. But in July of 1867, this cemetery was anything but. A local beloved school teacher, Ann Whitney, was murdered in front of her students in her classroom. Her body was riddled with 18 arrows as she fell to the floor. Now, at this cemetery, along with those mourning the loss of Miss Whitney, was the Cockendall family. They were mourning because their daughter was missing. She was shot in the back with an arrow trying to escape the schoolhouse, and their young son John was in the hands of the Comanche. As for the rest of the Whitney family, they continued to live out their lives in Comanche County, where Ann herself had lived and taught before that fatal summer session in Hamilton. Now I'm standing today at the Tolliver Cemetery, where her father, Orlando, is buried. She also has family members buried in the Whitney Cemetery. So if you're like me and you like to see some of these things for yourself, come on out to Tolliver Cemetery, go over to Whitney Cemetery, or visit the folks down in Hamilton. They'd be glad to have you. Well, that's the Ann Whitney story. I'm Jared Easley. Until next time, for TexansUnited.com, thank you.